Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Universal Support Call. So I sent out an email to everyone, and there's a couple of things that we want to talk about. But first of all, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being at ESHIP. I really appreciate it, and for everyone else who's not able to make the call, we're just going to record so that there is a version of this call. So my question for all of you, I think that we're all a little buzzed and really happy from being together at the ESHIP Summit. So there's that sense of connectedness. And then sometimes you go back to your communities or you start picking up the work that you've been doing, and then we were in a little utopia, right, of people like you, kind of a very kumbaya moment, and then you go back and you go, why is this not like ESHIP? And not that we made it perfect at ESHIP, but all of you coming together really made it cohesive and consistent. So share, if you will, what is one frustration that you are feeling from not being at ESHIP or post ESHIP. So I will start with Katie.
All right. I think one of the things that I'm thinking about as a challenge coming out of ESHIP is just all the people I connected with and how I'm going to follow up with all of them and what that could look like and what sort of what that timeline is, and sort of the old adage, like, inspiration is perishable. Like, if I don't do it now, will it matter in a couple of weeks when I actually have time to do it? So that's just been on my mind. I will popcorn to Eric, because I know you're on the call.
Oh, I'm so sad that you did that. Boy, let's see. But thank you. That's fantastic. I think I'm not sure if it answers the question. It's sort of there's some sort of early stage stuff about revisiting other aspects of our ecosystem that need some help and how to get those going. So I don't know, it's good in the way that it's kind of continuing to do the work. Just, I don't know, the frustrations of getting some early stage projects off the ground. So I'm not sure that I have anything more. I don't think I've met Kelly, so I will popcorn to you.
Thanks, Eric. And I don't think we met at ESHIP either. I'm located in Danville, Virginia, and I work in an organization called The Launch Place, and we have investment funds that we invest in startups, but we're actually a nonprofit that owns for-profit investment funds where we're looking for them to have an economic impact through jobs and, of course, a return on our investment in our community. So we're just one piece of the ecosystem here locally. And right now, our ecosystem is pretty fragmented, where we've got, of course, different other service providers that are here in our community. And now we're trying to figure out how can we come together beyond just a monthly meeting to catch up with each other to see what's going on. And so that's, I guess, my frustration is how do I take the momentum from ESHIP and apply it to the community here locally? And Beth, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay, sorry, I'm multitasking. I realized I put the same question twice in a survey. I need to edit it. But anyway, yes, it was utopia, and it was definitely much needed therapy for me out in Kansas City. So thank you, everyone, for that. The frustration coming back to the day-to-day is the typical, what's becoming typical, which was very atypical to me, is the politics and such. So we're in the midst of working with our mayor and our county executive to make sure our economic development gateway doesn't forget the need for the ecosystem building function. So I thought we were beyond that, but we're not. So that's where we are. On a positive note, it's beautiful here in Erie, Pennsylvania, finally. I'll popcorn to Dia.
Hello. I think Celia, you put it really well. The frustrating part is that it just seems like those who were not there attending, even though you try to relay the message, giving presentations, is just not the same. And I'd love to hear from any of you if you have ideas on what is the best way to relay that information, because it's kind of hard to um, feel the energy when you were not there. However, in my head, I'm just like, oh, I wish I could take all these people in a bus and take them to ESHIP so they can see and feel the same energy. But that has been a little frustrating, but I've been working on my presentations and just so that it's on me to relay that information more accurately.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, that doesn't sound good. It does sound like the natural tensions. So some of the tensions that we're feeling and hearing are how all of this kind of rolls together, right? Like, what do we do now? And I know Andy and Victor talked about an RFP process and in supporting and funding the work going forward. And I applaud Kelly and Peter and all those people that came together in 6.5 who talked about, so how do we get those foundations rolling along? So that's a really important challenge. And it's going to take all of you. So Katie and I actually probably in like September or October, when the initiatives rolled out from last year, kind of held on to parts of this one and we're working towards it, and got input from Andy, who brought in Wendy over at the foundation, not Wendy Gillies, the other Wendy who works with foundations, in talking about how we connect with community foundations in order to support the work that, because one foundation, not the size of Kaufman, not the size of Silicon Valley Foundation, I mean, none of it's going to be able to support all of this stuff, right? So in looking at how we engage, it seemed like a better idea to be able to connect with a hub like the Council on Foundations, which works with community foundations all over the country, as opposed to trying to hit up, it's kind of a buckshot, scatter shot kind of deal. So we got some input, which I forwarded onto the team that's working on this, and it'll be a work in progress. And just like all the other things that will go forward. So there'll be a group of people like the 6.5 group that have a little bit of momentum, some cohesiveness, some things that they're already talking about, and then being able to get some resources to help that conversation keep moving, and then try to plot out a plan to go forward. So with Katie, Beth, and Eric as well, you've got some other resources that will be able to help that momentum. When Christine and I started these positions of community activators, the one thing that we really did put in there is, oh, and thank you, Beth, you have a draft brief, great. We're gonna call them canvases now because we keep messing up the names. And then what we're gonna also work on to move that forward is we're gonna come up with the newest version of the Canvas brief, which looks a lot more like the ones that you used at ESHIP, so that we'll just transform that information. I'm hoping to find some intern at Kaufman to help support those efforts. If not, we may have to rely on some of you to transform that information onto something that we can upload. So I'll tell you a little bit about our plans and have you all weigh in. So the equation that Christine and I had come up with back in October is these initiatives. You need an initiative because you have to know what you're working on. You can't just get a bunch of people together and go, we're going to do something, and then not know what the plan is, right? So there has to be an initiative. And then there needs to be a group of ecosystem building practitioners. Those are people with boots on the ground, some institutional knowledge, some having been doing the work, or the customers that will be the people that are going to benefit from the work, right? Then you need a national resource provider or two. The reason you need national resource providers are, it has to be housed somewhere. It cannot, you know, I walked around to a lot of those tables and heard, and Kauffman will do this and Kauffman will do that. Well, Kauffman's not going to be able to do as much. Even if they wanted to, there was no way they could support 30 initiatives, let alone 130 initiatives, right? And there are things that certain foundations like Kauffman are interested in. Well, the Case Foundation is interested in inclusion. There are other foundations and other resources. It's not just about the money or foundations. There's a whole bunch of other resources out there, right? So Startup Champions Network would be great to be able to put together a training program, because their audience is ecosystem building practitioners. So if you have an entity, an organization, first of all, those can actually be funded by the foundations, because foundations cannot fund just a group of ecosystem building practitioners, right? It has to be housed in something. So that's sustainability, scalability is that, which is the national resource provider, plus it needs to live on, hopefully for some length of time. Then you need the ecosystem building practitioners, because sometimes organizations like foundations solve for things that they think is a problem, but without the board of customers, they don't know, right? It's just an idea. So companies come up with stuff all the time, and then what do we do with entrepreneurs? We always ask them, where's your product market fit? Like, who's your customer? If you can't answer who's your customer, then maybe you don't have a viable product. And that's a really crappy thing to find out after you've spent time and energy. So that's why it needs to be all three of those things, and all three of those things would make a great pilot program. There are several versions, like there doesn't have to be the one only training program, right? There are certain initiatives that are one. Like if we talk about a common set of metrics, you can only have one common set of metrics. Otherwise, they cease to become common. So there you need like one, or a living dictionary. We can't have, there are 50 million different kinds of dictionaries, but really those definitions kind of need to be pretty consistent, right? So anyway, so that's a tension that we're living through right now. It's messy, it's complex, it's going to stay that way. So I'm actually working on a blog post to talk about how messy this is, because I think that so many times we push aside the messiness and we think that we've gotten rid of the problem. And the problem doesn't actually go away. People go away because they get frustrated and they feel unsupported and they don't feel purposeful. So people tend to go away, and then you think that they took the problem away, but the problem still exists, right? So those are the kinds of things that we're working towards right now. So all that to say, we still don't have answers. We're just making it up as we go along, and most of the time we get it right more than we get it wrong. So that's great, and I can't think of a better group of people to be working on that with than all of you. So now we have different people coming in. So a couple of these people have been on the calls before. Kelly's new to the call. You're going to have more new people come onto these calls. The question is, what do you need these calls to be to support the things that you need, not only just for the initiatives, right? Working group calls are working groups. That's what we talked about. But sometimes you need community. So I was on an inclusive field call, and one of the people in inclusive field was invited to become part of an organization whose whose history wasn't very inclusive. So that was a really interesting challenge. And he didn't have anyone in his community that he felt comfortable talking to about it. So these are all the people that geek out on the same things that you geek out on and have some other frame of reference. And it's nice to be able to talk to people who understand, for lack of a better word, what you're going through. So do you want the phone call that we do once a month to be able to be something like that, where we talk about common themes, or we troubleshoot and we become ombudsman? Do you want to weigh in on how your project is going, and this is a good touch point? Like, this is all in support of you and your work. What I'm going to ask you is think about it, right? Now and for the next week or two. I'm going to be sending around a survey that you can chime in on. We will take the information so that it's aggregated. So while it's interesting to see who says what, and different phone calls are different. So several of you are on more than one call. What it is for goal 6 may be different than what the needs are for goal 3. So it will each be goal specific. I'll have you all weigh in on what you'd like. We'll take the information and feedback and make it transparent so that you can see what your fellow callers are saying. And then it's not said that it needs to stay that way, right? Maybe it needs to stay that way until the RFP process. And maybe it will evolve after that. So you tell me, okay? Because this is your call. This is your hour. And so you decide. So what I want to do right now is I want to open it up, because I've done a lot of talking. And I want to open it up and see what your thoughts are. And I have no qualms about calling on people. You know that. So, so if you don't talk, and then the other thing is, I was in sales, and I know, because I've done this, and Eric has said, I have no problem in the uncomfortable silence, because I sat on the other end of the sales table. So I will be, and I know Eric will eventually talk because he doesn't like the uncomfortable silence, but besides Eric talking, maybe other people would like to chime in. So I'm going to open it up to you. And what are you thinking right now?
Celia, this is Katie. Are you asking us what we're thinking about these calls, or sorry, I got a little bit.
Yes, there was a whole lot of information, but yeah, discuss openly what you think, and then knowing that there'll be a survey to come up towards the end of the month that gets your input. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go. This is Katie, just in case. You know, I think one of the things that I really react well to is structure, and so I like having something on my calendar that's like a reminder, like, okay, I've promised to do these things, and I'm committed to this group, so I'm going to show up and be a part of the conversation. So I like the idea of having, you know, these monthly touch base calls, and I would love to see them take more of a format of a working group instead of you know, we've been spending a lot of time on process, which is super important so that we're all on the same page and all bought in and working towards the same goals. But I think it would be exciting to really turn some of this time into work time, because, you know, this is as you all know, this is none of our full-time jobs. And so the time we are able to carve out, I think we could really benefit from working together.
This is Dia. I think I'll second Katie on that. I like the accountability aspect, that, you know, we know that this is a time before we need to get some of the stuff we're working on done. I also like the information sharing. Like Celia, you mentioned, we have similar interests, but we have different backgrounds. And I think that's a great way to problem solve some of the issues that we might be facing, either working on these projects or in our individual field and at work. So I'd also love to utilize this time as information sharing and problem solving.
I agree with you, Dia. This is Kelly. I like that information sharing to see where everyone's at. And also I see it as a way to connect across the country, because as we're looking to build national around the whole ecosystem movement, knowing what's going on in different areas. And if we need a connection in Kansas City or Erie, Pennsylvania, that we're given these updates, that we can, continue to connect the dots nationally too.
Yeah, and I agree with everything everyone is saying. And I do feel like that we're working more towards morphing into a working group. Again, talking about what's been done. There have been some things done around having the conversations around the council and foundations, and trying to get some draft briefs together and such. I think, the couple of goals or a couple of initiatives under number 6 seem to be cropping up to the top with most interest. And I don't know that the numbers are valid, but 6.5 and 6.2 seem to got the most attention at the moment. Whereas when we first started talking about goal 6, the policy playbook seemed to get the most attention. So again, it's morphing over time. And I think, as time goes on, we all have varying levels of availability, but as things start heating up around specific initiatives, we can really start to get some stuff actually done, right?
And I believe I've answered something similar on a previous call, but to restate, hopefully briefly, I think there's sort of 2 things we need to consider. I agree. I think we're moving more into the project management and driving that forward sort of phase of all this. So having more structure and deliverables and that kind of thing, that's something I think we need to ramp up quite a bit. But there's also kind of that community onboarding, that on-ramp for folks who are, I've heard about this, they may have an important voice or, great new knowledge and things to apply to a different problem. How do we make sure that there's a way for them to get involved versus, oh, you got to wait until ESHIP next year. So that's a consideration, I think, and the sort of like the community building around the field, which Cecilia and Christine have done a great job of working on. So I think that's an important thing to consider, but I think my emphasis or my interest is more on the project management side at the time.
Great, thank you all. That's good, and then you're all kind of aligned, so that makes my job easier. So one of the things that we talked about doing, and this is just ideating right now, okay, and we're seeing if it makes sense. So the idea of putting all these initiatives on a central universal canvas, like the one that we used at the ESHIP Summit, which is slightly different from the ones that we used prior to the summit. And Eric, you did a really great job of creating like a Google form that where it put the information in, and I'm wondering if we can replicate something like that on the new project canvas. So I'll share it with ESHIP champions and all of you look at that. So the idea is that as each team, each project team, or project team we'll call them, puts that document together, that I will go and add it to the dashboard. So the community dashboard, which some of you may be familiar with, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in. I think actually all of you are familiar because I emailed everyone back. So on the dashboard, we have a link for initiatives and goals. What we may do is put each goal on a separate page, have the recordings for each of the calls, and what that call will be like for those individual goals. So universal support, here are people that have been on the calls, here's the recorded history of the calls, and then this is the cadence of the call. So not only the date and time, but we take, let's say, the first, 20 minutes to talk about where we are on each project. The next 20 minutes we'll talk about some pain points, some asks of each other, and then brainstorming, and then also checking in on how you're doing in your community, what you need from the community at large, and we can change the order of that. So that if I'm brand new and I get on this beta dashboard, whether I'm an ecosystem building practitioner or a national resource provider or just an interested person, but I get on the dashboard because I want to be involved in a working group. This is not for the general ESHIP audience. That's what Facebook is about. For people that want to talk more about a specific subject, that's usually what Slack's about, where you post about projects and you ask questions and you share information. But these are working groups. So here are the videos from the last bunch of calls that we've had. Here are the initiatives that are currently happening. And I don't know if you remember, but back when the draft, and currently, if you go on the Kaufman page to see what the draft of the current playbook looks like, you can comment on it. You can't edit it, but you can comment, which means that you will be able to share your thoughts with the people that are working on the projects. So if you're not working on project 6.1, but you have some ideas and some input, that you can leave a comment on these sections, and then the team that's actually working on it can take that input and develop a new version or write out a new thing, update as they'd like to, and be influenced by the community at large. And then the project team can take that information and not be, it's like, oh, okay, well, thanks for your input, but that's not applicable to what we're doing. We're going to go this way. That's totally up to you. But this way you get mass collaboration in all its messiness to be able to input and share, right, without changing the project from the teams that are working on it. And if 6.1 has 4 different renditions of the project, maybe they look at each other's stuff to see where they're duplicating efforts or overlapping, or if they're going in different directions and it's viable to have 4 different cases or versions of this, that's okay too. Then you also have national resource providers that can look at the initiatives as it's in progress to say, hey, so we're interested and we want to co-collaborate with you, right? And then you can look at other projects and say, hey, that interests me. I want to be on that team. So you can decide how that works out and fleshes out. It's still messy. It's still whatever, but how does that sound? That sound like it makes some sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any ideas on improving that model?
One thing I'm not sure if it's improving or not. I'm not quite sure the path so where the comments are made. So should the team just kind of look at the document and see what the comments are, or is there a way to get like alerts? Or I'm wondering how do we get that fed into the loop so folks can review that prior to kind of the next meeting?
So maybe that's a reminder prior to the call, right? Like, I don't know, maybe it's a calendar reminder that says, here's the updates to date or something like that, that we can, I don't know what works.
Well, and it could just be each different project team or whatever could decide, maybe I volunteer to do it this week, and I'm going to review the comments. Anybody's welcome to do that, but I'll bring a list of what the comments were and if there's any themes that are emerging. That's one way to do it. Just curious.
Is there a way to get notified when comments are made?
It's harder because so our beta dashboard is a little bit more unsophisticated. It's actually just a Google site. we built this site, Christine built it, and I maintain it, but we built this site because if it's not connected with the Kauffman Foundation, then there's less people that have to approve it in order, if it has a Kauffman.org attached to it, it has to go through. You would not believe how many people have to check in to make sure that the language is correct, the wording and the verbiage, because you're representative of a foundation, a large foundation at that. So so that's why before anything goes out that has a Kauffman thing on it, there's so much more time that it takes us several weeks to get a newsletter out. So yeah, I don't know that I can set up an alert that way. Like, it will take your people power to do that. Like, it's just beyond the scope for 8. I mean, it's 100. It's a 30 initiative currently, right? So yes, Eric.
I'm just, so which doc, I just wanted to see, check it out. So this is from the main Kauffman page that their comments are, or I'm not sure which site it is. I don't see it in the dashboard, so I'm wondering where we need to go in order to see where that's.
Yeah, so once we get that process worked out, it would live on a page in the dashboard.
Cool.
So that's the vision of it. And then let me see if I can pull up the I think this is the latest. There's a mock-up of the.
You can comment on the playbook. I've seen a place where you can comment on the playbook too. But I think what you're talking about is for the work groups internally on the dashboard, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm kind of talking about both because, if we're making comments on the playbook, I can see right after ESHIP per se, 10 or 15 comments a day, and then it dries up for quite some time. And if we're constantly needing to police ourselves to go back and check for new comments, it could get very weary. If it's all going to somehow be automatically brought into the dashboard somehow where we could see it from there, I do know, and I can't do it, I'm not sure how to do it, but there is a way in Google Sheets to notify people of changes. But again, having to self-monitor myself going in there either daily or weekly or monthly might be a little bit challenging.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts? So this is the Project Canvas 2.0, Eric. It's the Andy version 2.0. I think that's what he's calling it. So, so it's there's another version I'm happy to share with you as well, that was centered around what Value Web did. But that presentation thing that you're seeing is basically the Project Canvas, the project brief template, or Canvas that we talked about. And then the piece at the bottom, as you're looking at it, there is an NRP use because it needed to figure out what your board of customers are, and also what their commitments are. So, and commitments for national resource providers don't necessarily just have to be money. Oh, the doc is locked. Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to, let me figure out how to share it. In the meantime, let me see if I can share it in a way that you can see it. So bear with me. No, maybe not. I don't know that I can enlarge it enough for everyone to see it on my screen, even if I shared my screen. Oh, let's see, present. Maybe not. It's one of those technical days. That life is not working as easily, maybe because it's Monday. Nope, not going to happen. Sorry. When I get something that's shareable, I will definitely do that. But once we figure out if that process is worth investing the time to make them all shareable and have you document, otherwise we start creating more canvases and then it just sits there until we do something with it. So universal support otherwise, what are you finding in your communities that you could use help with or want to talk about? Or is everything going great?
I would like direct connections with communities that have really figured it out. So we're to the point now where our economic development gateway was supposed to be taking on the ecosystem building role and understanding how important it is. I need other communities that have done that because they're wavering now.
Why do you think they wavered? Oh, no, I'm sorry. What do you think is the catalyst?
I think it's the ecosystem actors that don't see their way to system-wide need, don't want to be held accountable. So they're politicking. The statement from the CEO of the organization that was going to take this function on and saw the importance just recently said to us, well, we don't know, there's so much entrepreneurial activity going on in the community, we don't know what else there would be left for us to do. So trying to reconvince them that the system-wide health monitoring and advocacy and convening and facilitating and agreeing on resources that are needed and how we prioritize applying resources to ultimately realize the outcomes and be able to tell whether we're having a positive impact or negative impact or no impact at all is key. So if I could find someone else that has done that, or 2 or 3 or 10, that would be really helpful.
What were you going to say, Dia?
I was just going to say that I don't know if our community has it figured out. However, we are in economic development. We are officially the economic development firm for the city, and I can say that we have taken the lead on the ecosystem development, especially with my role being entrepreneurship specialist. So, Beth, when you spoke to this, you said the CEO. Is there any other position that they have, or is he mainly in charge of all of it?
Yeah, this organization is being re-energized to become the gateway to economic development, and they're in the midst of releasing their broad economic development strategy, and entrepreneurial ecosystem building was supposed to be an important part of that. So yeah, if we want to maybe talk online, I can dig in a little deeper with you about what's happened in that community. So maybe it's something I could share with them as more evidence that it's important. That'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, we'd be happy to. Like, we definitely want other people on board and trying to assign different roles of the ecosystem building. However, we kind of have taken the lead on it, and it's included in our work plan.
This is Eric in Albuquerque. One question. I mean, the typical thing about who do you need to convince, and what are the things that they're attuned to, that their attention is on. Unfortunately, the folks for whom the system is working, they don't feel they necessarily need any additional help. So if things are going okay, great. We're going to double down on the things that are working, and that's an argument that's it's got some value to it. I think for folks who care about more equitable, healthy ecosystems, there's a strong argument to be made, and that's one thing that's happening here in Albuquerque, is that there's a lot of people who've not been able to participate, a lot of different structural barriers, et cetera. So just from an equity standpoint, that's one reason why making ours a more inclusive ecosystem is important. I think, I'm not sure how the data goes, but I think there's a fair amount of data, certainly about women founders, and a fair amount of data about other sort of Black and brown founders that are sort of achieving more than typical market gains, because chances are they had to bootstrap and they had to move forward. So I think there's a data argument to be made. I'm not sure how easy it is to pull that stuff together, but it's really, how do you find, what are the arguments that could potentially work with the folks you need to convince, and then let's, as a community, see what we can do to help make those arguments, because we all have to make them from time to time.
Beth, I would also recommend getting an introduction to the city of Long Beach. I was on a radio panel discussion with their, I can't remember his title, but I think it was chief of staff actually to the mayor. And they are the fact that he was there representing the city, not as part of the mayor conference as far as I know, but as part of ESHIP. So Long Beach might be an example of a city that's really embracing this approach that you could talk to.
Great, thank you all for the input. And I think it's important that, just for the universal support, I'm not the only one that's dealing with this or will deal with this or has dealt with it, I know. And it's kind of a critical point after 5 or so years of building up to it.
I think, Beth, if I'm not mistaken, Long Beach is going to be at the Forward City Summit this week. So, yeah, because I know that they were one of the cities considered for ESHIP communities. So, so they should be there. But yeah, I think to Beth's point, sometimes, and it's all the trust building that we do, and it's definitely an honor that, because of all of you, is that there's a lot of trust created in this community. And so it's the funny thing is that people feel like if you create trust, then people will be open to being vulnerable. And the reality is that when you're vulnerable, you create more trust. So I think you all model that behavior by opening it up and saying the things that are risky to say when you're in your own ecosystem, right? You say, I don't know, or I don't have the answer, or I'm not sure that that's right. Those are things that we do hear a lot more openly than we're able to do back where we are. So thanks to all of you for creating that trust and the kind of environment where you're open to sharing, and that does create the trust. So thanks. Are there any other thoughts, and what else do you need in the way of support, or what other things come to mind that I can bring back as we put together our response, our thank you for attending ESHIP to all the other people? What do you want to share?
Well, for 6.5, one key piece is that EFN network, that there is one member of our group that does have a connection because they're a private foundation that have worked with them, but we don't know how to engage that group at this point. And you said maybe hold off, let's have a call and discuss, because I think, Katie, you guys are doing some things, so we're not doing that scattered approach. So I guess more clarification on how we should move forward with connecting to that EFN group.
Katie, do you want to share what happened or what was talked about when we were connecting with Wendy at the foundation?
Oh, yes. Honestly, Celia, that is so deep in the recesses of my brain. I don't even know if I can pull it up at this moment without my notes in front of me. But Kelly, Celia and I had we took the first stab, like she said earlier, on 6.5 almost a year ago now, it feels like. And, started at a certain point about, talking to a wide variety of foundations, and Andy and the folks at Kaufman really pointed us to thinking about community foundations and then utilizing the EFN network. Celia, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to push it back to you to recall what that conversation was like, because I'm not able to remember at this point.
Yeah, I think that what Katie had talked about, and I'll have to pull up the email as well. So what we had talked about was to put together a survey, because we thought, oh, well, we'll just survey organizations and foundations and say, so what do we need? And they said, well, so the likelihood of a foundation responding to a survey like that is probably slim, right? And what are they going to want to tell you? Because they don't even know. Like, you know, we started out in how do we create a funding class that talks about ecosystem building and supports it. And so we said, oh, well, you know, we'll ask them what questions they need to have answered. And yeah, that wasn't going to go. So so I think basically I have some information, and I'll forward it to the rest of the group if I've not done so already, about the conversations that we had about Council of Foundations. So I have some of it. So there was a couple of names. Wendy Torrance is the person at the Kauffman Foundation. So she deeply understands the foundation world. She's been there for about 12 years, and so Andy had suggested talking to her about how we approach that. And then there's a Wendy email that Beth and Katie have access to. So hang on. So they don't think a survey shared is going to work. And at the moment, it's the best people to talk to are Brad and Stephanie over at, who was that? Do you remember, Beth or Katie?
I think that was the Council on Foundations.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's also another organization, which is the Johnson Center for Effective Philanthropy, which may have some information and some insights. And there are a couple of people that we could connect with, or you guys can connect with, but I think is putting together a plan. So it's how we put together a plan of attack, or how you put together a plan of attack, and then some collaboration behind it, and then what you think you would need in the way of funding, like, you know, is it X amount of man hours? Is it resources like sharing with you a Zoom link so that you can have calls, and so think about what that approach looks like for you, and I will make sure that that the information gets shared out. So I think that's basically it. But it's a start, right? We didn't have the conversation with the Telluride Foundation people. We did not have a conversation with the Council on Foundations. All of a sudden, this was back in March, and then by like end of March, we were knee deep in going into ESHIP planning, kicked into high gear, and so things got put on the table. So that's where you're at. And so we want to be very mindful of how we reach out, because sometimes you only get the one shot, right? So that's it. That makes sense? Okay, we've got 6 minutes left. Anything else, Eric?
So I guess, and this could be on email or something else. So I just unfortunately lost the screen that showed me that canvas. What's the kind of the strategy on this 6.5 piece? I know I'm interested in making sure that the foundations that we've got locally are kind of tapped into this, so that they're getting some benefit, and hopefully at some point connecting them. But I'm not totally sure what the overall strategies of this, and I'm wondering if someone could recap that.
Yeah, I'm happy to recap. I know, Dia, you were on the group with me too that worked on this. But basically, I've got the canvas in front of me. So our description was to utilize the Entrepreneurial Funders Network, which is the EFN, to mobilize foundations around entrepreneurship funding. So we want to take current examples of how foundations are funding entrepreneurship and basically use that information to entice other foundations to do that. Or if the foundations are thinking about doing entrepreneurship type of ecosystem building funding, that they can reach out to another foundation that's currently already doing it. And so some of our project execution outline was to first establish a meeting with the EFN to gain buy-in and access to the network, because we're not members of the network, except for the one particular person in our group. And then from that, we would assess the current funding landscape and initiatives. So what are these foundations currently doing? And then identify regions and EFN champions for each region to engage other foundations. So even if foundations aren't currently thinking about entrepreneurship funding, maybe we need to push that and try to start those introductory calls so the foundations maybe will consider it in the future. And so that's basically what we're looking at.
So here's my curiosity in trying to outline your focus, because you said initially when you were talking about it, you said funding for entrepreneurs, and then you said funding for entrepreneurial ecosystems, and those are intertwined but different, right? And I know that originally when Katie and I had looked at 6.5, that we were talking about ecosystem building. Now, it's not right or wrong, it's just different, right? So if you want to focus on entrepreneur funding, then absolutely focus on entrepreneur funding. And if you want to focus on ecosystem building funding. And I think that there can be overlap, but I think that you want to make clear what your ask is, because they may come back and go, oh, we already fund entrepreneurs. Here are X, Y, and Z grants, and and we fund this incubator and this accelerator and this co-working space. So done, right? And what does that look like? And then also, like, where's that effectiveness? And what does the foundation get out of it? So a lot of the times so two things. I know that the Coffin Foundation, Victor, is working with other foundations that focus on entrepreneurship, right? Obviously, the relationship with CASE, with Knight Foundation, with all those. So there are large foundations talking to each other, right? But also, like, looking at the mission and vision of foundations, which will help you cull. And I'm sure that I know there's a database that we have at our library. Mel Lambert at the St. Louis Library would probably be a really great resource, because Mel is a research librarian. And with the 900 or so library systems across the country, there's a great way to cull together a list of foundations who have entrepreneurship focus. Right? So you have a target list, because the Council on Foundations may have that, but it's something that you'll all be able to get without, if you're going to ask the Council on Foundations to help you with something, like that part of it, if that becomes the ask, like which foundation it is, there are probably better ways to utilize resources to get that information without, because that's not part of your ask, right? But to figure out who your target market is, that's definitely something that can be done. I don't know if there are people, like I said, like Mel, who has the knowledge and skill set and the database to look at, or if it's a project that needs to be done. Like, is that something that needs to be funded? You want to make sure that you put into your project for that kind of funding, those kinds of man hours, because it's going to take some time.
Right.
And the whole idea is that we don't all do this stuff for free anymore, right? Like, there's some compensation. So even if it is, I'm paying some intern to get that information, that's a legitimate thing to put into your budget.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Mhm.
And this came up shortly after the conference. Someone was frustrated. They had broken into one of the roundtables, and it was around the credentialing for ecosystem builders. And they felt that the credentialing process for ecosystem builders was already, they were communicated with it. That was already well down, well on the way, well on the road to being available due to a small team's work with the International Economic Development Council, which is fine and great, but then why was there a roundtable around that subject? And I'm wondering if Victor, the Kauffman Foundation, and the EFN are already working on this at that level. Are we just making something up to work on, or should we be, is there a way to be in concert with them? So how do we manage that communication and know knowledge that other things are happening?
So that's a really great question, and I feel that that's also another tension point. I think IEDC, from the conversations that I've heard about, is working on something, but accreditation certification, does it become a mass of like AMA? Is there like an accreditation board across? Is there a standards board? Because standards board is also an initiative. So if we have one certification and standard, is it the only one? Is it one kind? Are you specializing in something? So I think that there's a misconception or confusion point of because we're growing this field, right? It's a nascent field. So with there not being a standard board currently, it's a chicken and egg problem also. Does the standard board come before the certification? Is there, we get a certification and that one's the only one, but it has a certain focus. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I'd love for you to, because as we have these discussions, I think it's really important to have questions available. Oh, the other piece of the community and the onboarding is talking about a way for everyone to get to know each other and not feel like the new kid in class. And and so Kelly met Dia because Kelly and Dia were in the same working group, and Dia's been on some of these calls. Eric and Beth were both up on stage as ESHIP champions, so there's some familiarity and stuff. But there are going to be people that get on the calls that we may have never seen before, and it's really super awkward. So another piece of trying to make sure that we're all interconnected and we ask questions like that is, I think that on that page we get to build out an FAQ. So if we can start a list that maybe we put it on the general Slack channel and just a Google Doc that we can reference and say, so here are FAQs. Do we have answers to those? And if we don't, then how do we do that? I think that's also viable. So is an FAQ, does an ongoing FAQ thing also seem like something necessary? Yes? No? Yeah?
I don't know if people will take the time to seek it out, though. Do you think that they would read it before they joined a call, or they're just going to join a call and...
I think they could join a call. So we do have FAQs and references on the beta dashboard. Right now, there's not a whole lot. I have to replace the, so this is the current FAQ link, and it has Playbook 2.0, so I need to update that. We have an initial reading list. I need to update that too. There's a couple of recommended podcasts. We haven't paid a whole lot of attention to this because, summit. But other parts of that seem like a good reference for anybody who is on a working group call. So maybe a list for this month, and I'll put it in a general Slack channel that everyone can chime in on, is what else do you need, right? So what are the needs and desires of the working groups, and then start a list of FAQ responses. Does that sound like a helpful thing? Yes. And then I don't know, Kelly, that people are going to look, but then we can just say, hey, so we can, right? Okay. Oh, okay.
Save time by saying, we've got all this information here. Go check it out.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. So here is the FAQ thing. So sorry about that, Eric. Like, he's the only one that got that. Eric's special. There's Pat.
But back to Beth's question, as far as with 6.5, should we put the brakes on it so we figure out? I mean, because this is a sensitive topic, especially trying to get involved with the different funders. I don't want to have double ask working on the same type of initiative.
Yes, I second that. I remember Andy stopped by for a quick second when we were having our discussions. He did not mention anything, but he did say that, oh yes, that he was the one who told us about EFN, and we just don't know if they're having any conversations already.
Okay. So let's do that. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So so why don't we, as soon as we can get the stuff out there so that everyone can see it, will definitely help. And that keeps other people from going rogue and running around and saying, you know, we're doing this. No, we may not be doing this. So I like that. Yes, Eric. So tell us what you're thinking.
Well, I'll give it back to Beth. No, just like, you know, when first timers come up and we want to give them some kind of an intro, just like the little intro I did for some folks who are going to Forward Cities, right? I don't want them to feel like they're going into this big thing and they don't know anyone. So just knowing a couple people sometimes helps. So if there's some folks who are usually on a call, that might be a good thing where, you know, they can talk to Dia, or they can talk to, you know, whoever really has a sense of where the group is. But it just makes it a little bit easier and nicer, and I think, you know, makes for a healthier community in general. That was my angle. I
like that. So part of the bio thing we were talking about. So some of you have been on like the storytelling or ESHIP champions. There's like a 2 or 3 sentence, you know, something about me. And I think we talked about on the inclusion call, a nice ice-breaking question is, tell me something you want me to know about you, right? That's the nice warm intro. And where you can put in your contact info, your preferred method of contact. Like if you don't want people calling you, don't list your phone number. I'm going to suggest you don't list your phone number on the beta website because it's open, right? It's public. But if you have a preferred email, or talk to me via LinkedIn or something like that, or communicate with me on Slack, those are good ways to connect with people. And then if somebody maybe is an ambassador for that goal call, then we can put a little asterisk and say, this is a good person to connect with. If you're new to the community and would like somebody to connect with, that's a good ambassador. We can work on things like that. And then the goals and initiatives that you're interested in. So when people look at that page as they're new to the community, they would have some frame of reference. So as they sign up, we can direct them to look at those things. I can't promise you they'll all read them, but at least it's there, right? It's like your handbook at work. So we'll see. All right, so I want to wrap up, and we'll just make it easy. So you can just say a word that that shares how you're feeling. So I will start with Kelly.
I guess excited. I don't. You say one word, so.
right, and you can popcorn and pick somebody.
Beth.
Okay, how am I feeling? I'm feeling excited for Pittsburgh this week and seeing everybody in Forward Cities. And I'm excited that Goal 6 is moving along. So happy to have everyone here. I'll go to Eric.
Hungry, because I haven't eaten lunch yet, but I'm also hungry for this to move forward. And Thea.
I feel connected. And that was also one of the things that I think could be important for this call, is for us just to stay in touch and feel connected, because networking is important. Celia, did you go?
Okay, and I am grateful to all of you. So thank you for your time and your energy, and we just keep doing epic stuff together. So great. Everybody have a great month, and you'll get a survey soon about what you'd like the call to be. Okay? Take care.